Schmidt, could you tell me what have been the major changes in branding as you see it over the past few years?
Well, branding started out sort of as this, how should I say, image projection device, meaning the company sends out its communications, wants to structure the brands for its consumers, and that's how it's been for many, many years. And over the last few years, this has changed. First of all, we see a lot of consumer-generated media, so consumers have much more input into the brand than they used to. As a result, the advertisers and the brand managers have to rethink their communications more from a consumer point of view. That's number one. Number two is communications are also going internally. In fact, the hot topic right now is internal branding, communications towards your own employees and making sure that they live the brand. And then the third trend, I would say, is branding is becoming more accountable in terms of measurement, brand valuations, at all sorts of levels, at the level of the individual brand as well as the corporate brand. So these are the three major trends.
Could you tell us a bit more about the measurement of branding?
The measurement is happening at three levels. First of all, in terms of the financial value of the brand, you get major firms like Future Brand, Interbrand, and other brand agencies coming up with brand evaluations, which is really the dollar value of a brand. And they do that for individual companies as well as for entire industries. Just to give you a couple of examples, the brand value of a brand like Coca-Cola is estimated to be 95% of the entire assets of the company. So that tells you that a lot of the value is actually in the intangible that we call brand. And when you go from industry to industry, you find that, for example, the consumer packaged goods has, of course, more brand value than you might find for a utility company. But what is interesting to me is that over the years, when you look at these studies sort of longitudinally over time, the brand value in pretty much every single industry has been increasing.
What would you say were some of the B2C companies that do a really good job in branding?
Well, it changes over time, but I would say at the beginning of the new century, now we are in 2006, I think Apple did a fantastic job. The company was in serious trouble, as you know, in the late 90s. But then Steve Jobs came back and he relaunched a whole range of fantastic, innovative new products and backed those up with great branding campaigns. The most successful one, of course, is the iPod. And it's a global advertising campaign for the iPod, and it's done very much focusing just on the visual, on the image of the product, not giving all the different features of it. So I think that's very innovative. I personally like also companies that don't do advertising at all and build a great brand. Starbucks is, of course, a classic example by now. They do a little bit of communications and advertising there, but their major asset is actually the stores where the experience of the brand is taking place.
You've talked a lot about branding in B2C companies. Does this mean that branding is not important for B2B companies?
Well, I've been talking about B2C because that's where branding is initially coming from, but more and more B2B companies are also discovering that they need to worry about the brand. Now in B2B compared to B2C, branding is a little bit different. The focus is usually on the corporate brand. So, for example, a pharmaceutical company would brand the company as a whole. I've been involved as part of my Center on Global Brand Leadership here at Columbia, for example, in the rebranding of Eli Lilly. The company said, what do we stand for? What do we want to stand for in the eyes of all of our different constituents, which are, in their case, of course, the patients. They get increasingly more power, but it's also the doctors and the hospitals, and it's in fact even the government. And that's fairly typical in B2B businesses, that you really need to look at all the different constituents and that you really need to worry about the corporate brand rather than the product brand.
Are there any companies other than Eli Lilly that have done a good job in branding?
Well, I think GE is going through an interesting rebranding. They used to have this corporate advertising campaign for all of their different businesses called "We Bring Good Things to Life," and that was very, very successful. But now under InMeld, we see this notion of imagination at work, which is very much an internal branding campaign to motivate the employees and to make sure that in whatever GE is doing, it will communicate innovation and imagination.
What would you say are some of the major trends in branding as you see it going forward?
Well, I think one of the major trends going forward will be that we see a whole range of new media that will allow brand managers and communication managers to communicate more effectively if they are good at it. There are lots of consumer-generated media. I've seen a fabulous campaign recently by Dove soap, the Unilever brand. They ran a commercial only on YouTube. It was not produced for television. It was not produced for print. It was a pure campaign on the YouTube website. And I think that shows the power of these new media that are emerging on all fronts.
Other than these changing media, what other challenges do you see that companies have in branding?
Well, one challenge will always be to keep a successful brand innovative. And I think that requires creativity. You see, I always stress in my lectures and courses to students as well as to executives that branding is not only about number crunching. That's certainly important. It's important to understand the value of the brand. It's important to always look at numbers, from year to year. But you also need innovation, you need creativity, you need to think out of the box. Take Starbucks, a company that I mentioned earlier. I think Starbucks is very innovative again. And they are doing a whole initiative called the Entertainment Initiative, where they say we are no longer just selling coffee, we are selling CDs and books, and we have the permission from the customer to do that. So it's a very interesting, call it brand extension, and it's a very innovative, creative approach.
A number of the students watching this interview are going to go into marketing and into branding. What are some of the things that you think they should be concerned about?
Well, you need the basics of marketing. So to have taken the marketing course is, of course, of advantage. When you go into the area of branding, there are really two routes. One is the route of starting out in a say major consumer goods company, which is probably where you can best learn the everyday skills of branding. If it's a cosmetic company, it might be a L'Oreal or an Estée Lauder. If it's a consumer goods company, it would be a P&G or a Unilever. I think that's a very, very good start. But the other route that you could take would be that through consulting. There are more and more brand agencies that provide consulting services to brands. And that, in a way, is more exciting because you see all sorts of different issues in branding that companies and managers are facing.
As students start their job search looking for positions in branding, what are some of the things they should look out for in the companies that they interview?
I think you want to avoid companies that have become very stagnant, where nothing innovative is going on, where they just do business as usual, because there you will very soon see that the company will be in trouble, the brand will be in trouble. Now, it may be great to come in a turnaround situation, but while you are sort of facing the decline of the brand, you're part of it, it can be quite frustrating.